Words spoken can shatter all planets into powder, exhaled breath can make the vacuum of the entire universe disappear, and one cell can devour the entire galaxy. Zhang Zicheng said, although it was my fault for one hair to destroy your universe, you are also too fragile. The high-dimensional person turned out to be myself. Keywords of the novel. Your universe is so fragile without pop-ups, your universe is so fragile. Download the full text, your universe is so fragile. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. One hair destroys the universe. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. One hair destroys the universe at night in the capital, it seems as if all the stars in the sky have set. The sky was pitch black with no light from the stars and moon, and the lights on the ground were bright and dazzling. But the bustling nights in the city have nothing to do with Zhang Zicheng, a migrant worker living in the suburbs. He has to wake up an hour and a half early every morning to commute, and can only get home at 10:30 p.m. every night, so he can't enjoy the urban leisure at night. If it were Zhang Zicheng who just graduated, he might even retaliate by staying up late, playing games he didn't play during the day until 2 p.m., or simply staying up all night reading novels. Zhang Zicheng, who started 996 at the age of 22 and has been working for 5 years now, not only suffers from the problem of staying up late and losing hair, but his energy is also far from sufficient. Putting down his phone, Zhang Zicheng rubbed his eyes and glanced at the time, only to find that it was already 11:48. I didn't dare to delay, so I quickly washed up and tidied up before 12 o'clock to go to bed. If it's past 12 o'clock, such as 12:5, you might think about rounding it up and going to bed at 1 o'clock. Then in the morning, I felt drowsy like a dead dog, hating myself for staying up late last night, swearing never to stay up late again, and so on in a cycle. Covering himself with a blanket, Zhang Zicheng closed his eyes, took a long breath through his nose, rolled over and lay on his side, starting to preview the dream materials for each night. At this moment, whether it was an illusion or not, Zhang Zicheng felt like he had heard a beep. Beep sound, but it was very, very subtle, and it was not an exaggeration to say it was a psychological effect. After carefully distinguishing, Zhang Zicheng felt that it might be the alarm sound of electric vehicles downstairs in the community. Those things were too annoying, as if the wind passing by would make a continuous noise, which could be considered the main noise at night in the community. Closing his eyes again, Zhang Zicheng began to seriously fantasize about how he would spend money if he could obtain a superpower of 1 million by giving a friend a knife. Didi. Detected the presence of high-dimensional life forms. Unable to hide, unable to block observation, Security Protocol 1 is invalid, Security Protocol 2 is invalid, and Security Protocol 3 is invalid. Didi. Suspected successful dimensionality upgrade, data mismatch, environment mismatch, physical laws mismatch, severe data loss. Alert, severe quality consumption, expected to format all data in 30 seconds, activate survival mode. High-dimensional existence, please grant me quality. Great high-dimensional existence, please grant me quality. A great high-dimensional existence, please grant me quality, and the system can write you into the highest management permission agreement. As the mechanical voice kept repeating itself, the sound became louder and more distorted, like a radio station that had increased its volume but lost its signal. Zhang Zicheng finally confirmed that he was not hallucinating. How can I give you quality? Zhang Zicheng opened his eyes and tentatively asked. Despite that, he actually began to doubt whether it was some boring guy who was playing a prank. It's not impossible. He has a friend who is currently working on short videos. What if he runs to his house during the day and puts a recording camera or something, and steals a picture of himself mistakenly thinking he's getting a golden finger? Obtain a response, obtain information, and obtain stable observations. The observation medium is consciousness wave. The form collapses, the quality is stable, and the quality is stable. Upgrade successful, opening congratulatory message, congratulatory message lost. Testing data, overall data loss of 87.76%. Current situation. Successful upgrade, friendly high-dimensional life forms, large-scale data loss, initiate processing plan number ULU.67937. Please confirm with the high-dimensional life form whether the system is allowed to occupy your 96 billion bore of thinking information as system computing power for system survival. The system has written you into the highest management permission agreement and will provide you with all possible help and services. You can use the high-dimensional perspective to verify the truth of this statement. There are also models and styles, with a lot of settings. Zhang Zicheng, who loves reading novels, has already come up with a science fiction story in his mind. Unfortunately, he has now identified it as a prank by his friend. He just casually wrote, "Sure, what functions do you have?" High-dimensional life forms respond to confirm information, computing power is covering. Please wait. Zhang Zicheng's consciousness, which had initially become more alert due to this sound, suddenly became a bit drowsy again, but it was only for a moment before returning to its original state. After all, it was late at night, and it was normal for him to suddenly feel sleepy. He didn't pay much attention either. But now Zhang Zicheng is even more vigilant, turning over and lying flat, peeking around to look for the camera. How could they still respond? Good kid, are you watching the live broadcast? Peeping at the old men while sleeping is shameless. Can't men have privacy? Complete the coverage of computing power and answer the high-dimensional host question. The system has lost a large amount of data and no high-dimensional information data, making it unable to provide high-dimensional observation services, downgrading, unable to provide high-dimensional production services, downgrading, unable to provide high-dimensional industrial services. Downgrading, unable to provide high-dimensional housekeeping services, downgrading, unable to provide high-dimensional entertainment services. Good guy, I don't know anything, so what's the use of me asking you? Zhang Zicheng laughed angrily and wanted to take a picture of me looking excited and embarrassed. At least give me some kind of divine luxury system, right? What kind of system do you want me to have? What kind of reaction do you want me to have? Because this system was too useless, Zhang Zicheng did not pay much attention to the subtle changes in the sound of the system after occupying his own thinking information as survival computing power. In self-retrieval, the system can reduce the dimensionality of the host. Correction, the host mass is too large to reduce dimensionality. Correction, the system can reduce the dimensionality of some information of the host. Reduce the dimensionality, right? Okay, you can lower it for me. Zhang Zicheng is happy, but still reducing the dimensionality. Are you going to turn me into a paper man? Thank you so much for letting me go to anime. Please select dimension reduction information. Arms, Zhang Zicheng said casually. Arm, defined. Defined, too large mass to reduce dimensionality. Is the setup quite troublesome? That hair. He became a bit impatient. Hair, defined, completed. Dimensionality reduction in progress, please wait. Zhang Zicheng blinked and tilted his head. Dimension reduction completed. Is that all? Zhang Zicheng, who didn't feel anything, was extremely disappointed and finally decided not to embarrass his friends anymore. Alright, Lu Yuping, stop messing around like this. I have to wake up early tomorrow. Where did you put your camera? Hurry up and tell me, I'll turn it off. I'm not interested in live streaming to sleep. Zhang Zicheng, feeling a bit restless, lifted the blanket and began searching the room for a camera and recorder, possibly a phone with both functions, while wearing underwear. But after searching for a while, I couldn't find any electronic devices facing the bed at any angle. Strange. Where exactly did it go? Just as Zhang Zicheng was puzzled, the system spoke again. Hair was dimensionally reduced by the system and placed in the latest observed low-dimensional universe. Due to data loss, it was renumbered. The low-dimensional universe reduced by hair .001 is observable. Should it be observed? Still playing. Observe and observe. Zhang Zicheng became increasingly impatient and just wanted this boring game to end quickly. At the same time, he also wanted to follow the sound source of the system to find the device, but he felt as if the sound was coming from behind his head, unable to find a specific direction. Unable to directly perform high-dimensional imaging, unable to perform retinal imaging. In the system search, a high-dimensional imaging device was found, which comes with its own energy source. Imaging is starting, and the signal is being transmitted. Suddenly, the computer screen on Zhang Zicheng's desk lit up. This surprised Zhang Zicheng a little, and he couldn't help but look up. What was displayed on the screen was an infinite black wall stretching across the vast starry sky, without any curvature, up and down. The nebula is pulled by a massive mass and slowly spirals towards the black wall. Light cannot escape the almost infinite mass of the black wall, making it difficult to reflect and escape, making the originally brilliant Milky Way increasingly dim. As the black wall grew deeper and darker, the speed at which the stars were absorbed by it also grew faster, until the already disrupted trajectory of the entire starry sky began to distort, deform, and accelerate, accompanied by the last moment of white light. The entire screen fell into a complete darkness and tranquility. Zhang Zicheng stared blankly at the screen. If this is a CG video made to prank him. Is the cost a bit too high at this moment? Low-dimensional universe .001, destruction. The sound of the system still does not contain any ups and downs. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Call of Low Dimensions. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The call of low dimensions. Half believing and half doubting is a good idiom, which summarizes Zhang Zicheng's current psychology. There is no more appropriate word. On the one hand, he believes that it is not realistic for prank friends to spend money on creating CG animations in order to have an average click-through rate of no more than 100,000 due to the normal human brain circuit. But on the other hand, what if Liu Yopeng's thing is really not a normal person? There are probably not many creatures on the entire planet who call people downstairs to eat, pick them up, and drive all day and night to Sanya to eat seafood. In the end, the desire to truly obtain the golden finger overwhelmed the resistance to making a fool of himself. Zhang Zicheng's Adam's apple twitched and he felt the gradually accelerating heartbeat, slowly sitting in front of the computer that had turned black again. Do you? Should I call you the system? The ultimate intelligent system ATX.16768 is at your service. Forget it, I'll call you the system instead. Zhang Zicheng touched his hair in front of his forehead and suddenly asked, did the hair you just reduced in dimensionality come out of my head? Why didn't I feel anything? System Tao. The system's strength in high-dimensional space depends on the 95 billion Bohr of spiritual power that the host provides to the system, and it is unable to directly extract hair from the subcutaneous tissue of the high-dimensional host. The hair strands that the system reduces are independent hair that the high-dimensional host naturally sheds but has not yet detached. Zhang Zicheng's face turned black and he quickly put down his hand, but dared not scratch his own hair anymore. Then he asked again, besides being able to reduce the dimensionality of my hair, what other functions do you have? Why don't you think about it more carefully? After judgment, it has been determined that the host has no autonomous observation function in the low-dimensional universe. In addition, the system can provide low-dimensional imaging services for the host. Zhang Zicheng tilted his head left and right for a moment, then tentatively asked, is it just that? It can only be seen. High-dimensional existence, your wisdom is as vast and profound as a supercluster. Having been with BB for so long, your only function is to watch live broadcasts. But Zhang Zicheng didn't give up and thought for a moment, can you elevate things in the low-dimensional world? The system fell silent for a moment, and Zhang Zicheng clenched his fingers and looked at the screen, as if the screen was the system in his mind. Please, it must be possible. Even if you can't make a fortune, you can still make paper money as a wife. The experiment has been successful, and the low-dimensional universe .002 has been upgraded as a whole. Answer. Yes, the high-dimensional host, which used to exist in low-dimensional systems, cannot be achieved. Nowadays, it can be achieved in high-dimensional systems. Okay. Zhang Zicheng stood up excitedly, but he looked at the left and right without any change or movement. He pressed down his hand that was about to be waved again and asked, "What about the low-dimensional universe you just upgraded to? Where is it? Did it overlap directly with the high-dimensional universe? Or did it become a parallel world or something like that?" Low-dimensional universe 002, although successfully upgraded, cannot withstand the radiation waves scattered throughout the high-dimensional environment due to its low mass within 3 nanoseconds, and naturally evaporates. This system, the brain, may also be volatile during dimensionality enhancement. In the future, without my permission, it is prohibited to upgrade or downgrade anything on your own. Before upgrading or reducing, please ask me. The prompt sequence has been written. Zhang Zicheng sat back on the chair, leaning against the back chair and slumped down, weakly supporting his forehead with a sigh. After several attempts to cross the system, Zhang Zicheng finally calmed down from his uncontrollable excitement. The system's brain is not working well, and as the host, we have to stand on our own legs. Previously, the system also mentioned that almost 90% of its overall data was lost during the dimensionality upgrade process. It is amazing that it can still retain the magical function of dimensionality upgrade and dimensionality reduction. After comforting himself, Zhang Zicheng suddenly thought of a somewhat serious question and raised his head to ask, "Just destroyed those 2 low-dimensional worlds. Shouldn't there be any civilized life? Isn't it impossible? Isn't this system a low-dimensional upgrade?" Before conducting the operation, the system did not conduct a comprehensive survey, and there is a probability of about 70 million that there is life. Zhang Zicheng, who had already started to get used to system pull-ups, immediately grasped the details and said, "How did this probability come about?" The total number of low-dimensional universes that have been surveyed, divided by the proportion that includes the existence of life and civilization. Zhang Zicheng's somewhat lackluster emotional curve suddenly pouted upwards again. "So, in the low-dimensional environment you detected, are there really 2 universes with life?" He has now roughly figured out the permissions of the system, and in short, the power it can use in reality is probably not much stronger than the force generated by glaring at others, and it is even less than the joule output of farting. It is difficult to affect things in reality, and naturally, he cannot expect to turn himself into any kind of dragon arrogance. Since that's the case, Zhang Zicheng has become curious about things in the low-dimensional world, wanting to know what low-dimensional life in reality looks like and whether it's just a paper man. "I want to see a low-dimensional world with life, what do I think? Can I lower my consciousness? Host consciousness wave is too large. Are you sure to reduce the dimensionality of some consciousness waves? What are the consequences?" Zhang Zicheng asked cautiously. According to calculations, the system can reduce the host's consciousness wave by approximately 0.037%, within the average fluctuation range of the host's emission per second, with no significant consequences. I asked about the low-dimensional universe. Zhang Zicheng sighed and shook his head, breaking his heart for the fragile universe. "Why are you so weak? There is currently no low-dimensional world with enough mass to carry the host's consciousness waves, which is likely to be directly destroyed by consciousness waves and collapse into a pure spiritual energy universe." "Fortunately," I asked. "Do not lower my consciousness. In the future, if there are any commands that may destroy the low-dimensional universe, please remind me." The prompt sequence has been written. Zhang Zicheng, who almost destroyed the 3rd universe, bit his back teeth. This system is really ruthless. It's rare to defeat the protagonists of the 3 universes at the beginning. If there were a world with merits and other settings, I'm afraid the red name on my head would be enough to become the 2nd luminous body in the solar system, and if I were to cut myself down, I would directly become a saint of merits. That's not right, after all, it's low-dimensional. Some people never kill or break the law in their entire lives, and the microorganisms in their bodies have even killed countless bacteria. Is this considered guilty? But low-dimensional people all have wisdom. Probably. Shaking his head, he pulled back the chaotic thinking. Zhang Zicheng looked at the screen in front of him and took the initiative to say, "You should be able to project scenes of life activities in a low-dimensional world onto the screen in front of me, right?" Speaking of which, Zhang Zicheng suddenly realized that this system seems to be able to control electronic devices as well. That seems to be useful, as long as the scope is large enough, I should be able to use it to do many things myself. While thinking, the sound of the system rang in my ears. Obtain instructions, display the devices built that IN energy, and start imaging in electronic data interference. The next moment, a set of images suddenly reappeared on the computer screen in front of Zhang Zicheng. In the dim and gloomy city, there is a hazy haze. The oil street lamps on both sides of the street, even if placed in the glass, condense countless water droplets due to the external temperature difference, appearing bright and dark. The only bright light is the bright moon hanging high in the sky. Under the radiance of the moon, on the central square of this city with a mix of Victorian and Gothic-style buildings, countless people can be seen gathered. They each wore a wide cloak, covering their bodies, but the bulging bulges under the cloak had different shapes and emitted a strange non-human aura. These people formed a circle, with intricate and slightly glowing formations beneath their feet, and eerie chants could be heard in their ears at the right moment. Zhang Zicheng's face turned strange and he said, "This blood curse. It's not very similar. It seems like this scene isn't in the game." The style in the screen is indeed very similar to a single-player game played by Zhang Zicheng not long ago, but there are significant differences in the details. After all, he is a platinum player who has achieved full success in this game, licking every inch of the map. If this scene had appeared in the game, he would definitely remember it. The system spoke up and explained, during the development process of the low-dimensional universe, it is highly likely to be disrupted by information from the high-dimensional world. Zhang Zicheng touched his chin and said, "Please explain in detail." As long as high-dimensional life thinks, it will constantly diverge information, and the low dimensions that passively receive this information will produce corresponding changes, but usually, high-dimensional interference conflicts with the laws of low-dimensional physics, causing chaos and the destruction of the entire material layer. However, if the interfering information is stable enough and does not conflict with the rules of the formation of the low-dimensional universe, the development of the low-dimensional universe will gradually tend towards receiving high-dimensional information. The probability of the former is extremely high, while the probability of the latter is extremely low. Therefore, having low dimensions of life is extremely fortunate. Zhang Zicheng pondered and said, "That is to say, this is not the universe of the works I see themselves. But rather, when people read those works, the information emitted by their minds interferes with the low dimensions, making them more and more like the works we see." The system immediately flattered. "Your wisdom is deeper than the spacetime black hole caused by singularity." Zhang Zicheng has already adapted to the system's flattery, mainly because his flattery is too dry and not smooth at all. He turned to the screen and asked, "What are these people doing?" The system said, "They are trying to communicate with you." Zhang Zicheng was shocked and said, "With me? Do they know my existence?" The system said, "To be precise, they are trying to communicate with the gods who have changed their world." End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Great music has the faintest notes. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Great music has the faintest notes. Zhang Zicheng is not foolish. The system only explained this sentence and he understood. Perhaps this low-dimensional world may have been relatively harmonious, but when playing games, I uncontrollably receive relevant information from higher dimensions that happens to be compatible with their original worldview, ultimately leading to this eerie appearance. He looked at the people in the picture and said, so now they are trying to call out the gods who have changed their universe, in order to save their own world. Yes, it is precisely because they are using their own world's special rituals for communication requests that the system is able to locate them here when randomly presenting scenes. Zhang Zicheng felt increasingly interesting and asked, so what should I do? How can I help them remove this worldview? After a moment of silence, the system said in confusion, the database is damaged and no corresponding solution has been found. It's okay. The system is powerless, and that self-contained nature is even more vulnerable. Without the system, he would just be an ordinary social animal. How could he know how to change the low-dimensional world? I have no way to lower my dimension and strike the evil god. If I really want to go down, I'm afraid another strand of hair will burst the universe, and humans and the evil god will perish together. Thinking this way, Zhang Zicheng suddenly had an idea. An object with hair so big doesn't work. What about a smaller one? For example, cells. Zhang Zicheng tentatively asked, System, can you reduce the dimensionality of my cells? Although a single strand of hair can destroy the low-dimensional world, at least according to the scene at that time, the low-dimensional world was also sustained for a while before being disrupted by the huge mass of hair. So, with smaller cells, shouldn't that be a problem? As long as the placement is a little further away from this planet. In cell definition, defined. After a moment of silence, the system gave Zhang Zicheng a disappointed answer. Very sorry, dear host. In the high-dimensional world, the system cannot interfere with microscopic things that the host itself cannot see. That's it. Zhang Zicheng frowned slightly. However, thinking about it is also correct. The system's ability to survive now also occupies a part of its own consciousness, which belongs to hardware pulling. There is no point in this. However, Zhang Zicheng did not give up on this. Looking at the screen, the people inside were still reciting incomprehensible spells. After thinking for a moment, he finally spoke up and said, Can I communicate with them? Anyway, it's better to communicate with people with lower dimensions first and see if we can come up with a solution together. The system immediately said, Answer the host, yes. Zhang Zicheng didn't feel happy, but instead warned, Shouldn't we be destroying the universe again? He has already been frightened by the two universes that were destroyed casually before. It is not certain whether there is life in those two universes, but this universe is certain to have life, so it is natural to be cautious. The system says, based on the current volume of the host, it will not cause too severe an impact on low-dimensional spacetime. So it will still have an impact. But at least it won't directly destroy the world. Zhang Zicheng thinks it's still necessary to try. Okay, then I'll keep my voice down a bit. Can you reduce the dimensionality of my voice? As the mayor of the coastal city of Korra, Simmons is located in the center of the square, holding a torch high and unconsciously murmuring prayers in his mouth. His soul had already gone from initial despair to madness in the long night, through countless cycles of nightmares, and finally fell back into numbness. Many things have happened in the city of Kola, initially with countless twisted limbs growing out of every inch of the city's architecture. People who die in their sleep are happy, as they are directly crushed into plasma by the tentacles growing from the walls. But every survivor who looked directly at those monsters had an uncontrollable twist on their bodies, and some also died on the spot. Some, however, used the legs that have grown out of their mouths to drag all their averted internal organs, causing them to stumble and crawl in pain. Simmons died for the first time, luckily in the stampede of the fugitives. After his death, he suddenly woke up from a nightmare and realized that time had just fallen into the night. Just as Simmons wiped away his cold sweat and breathed a sigh of relief, thinking that everything before was just a nightmare, he saw a huge webbed hand, resembling a fish, climbing onto the tallest clock tower in the city outside the glass window. At the moment of seeing the other person, Simmons felt an unbearable headache, as if the brain's instinct was resisting the gaze towards the other person. In his mind, he kept issuing warnings, and in a daze, he saw a twisted and detestable filth. Although it had hands and feet, it was far from human form. On the huge black and blue head, his face twisted into a chaotic mass. Simmons's eyes were so sour that they almost exploded. With just one glance, his entire body began to twist from the inside, and all the muscles, bones, and organs in his chest rotated towards the center. Finally, amidst intense tinnitus and excruciating pain, Simmons felt a thud in his chest. As if something had been squeezed out, and then he lost all his strength and fell to the ground. Then, he woke up from the nightmare once again. Not only himself, but everyone in the entire city will return to the beginning of the night after death. This cycle has passed countless times, countless times. The long night is boundless. Every time I wake up, I face different monsters and disasters. Simmons initially counted how many nightmares he had died in. But as he counted over 1,000 times, his memory also began to become chaotic, making it difficult to distinguish when each scene of death appeared. Countless people have completely lost their humanity in the process. What is even more terrifying than reincarnation is, every time I wake up, all fatal injuries disappear, but pollution and mutation are permanently preserved. Until now, Simmons' entire upper body remains twisted together in a spiral shape. But all his internal organs remain in this state of operation. He can even feel his heartbeat pumping continuously in the lower right corner of the vortex. Suddenly, amidst the chanting in the square, a mournful scream suddenly penetrated. Simmons turned his head and, under his dirty hood, his skin tangled together, making it impossible to distinguish between each other's facial features. Only the crimson one-eyed one, which had been forcefully cut open with sharp energy, looked towards the direction of the sound. Simmons did indeed see a familiar figure, wearing a feathered triangular hat and holding a sharp bone-picking knife, constantly strangling the people surrounding him from the periphery. However, with just one glance, Simmons turned back and numbly recited prayers with the people around him. But he's just another crazy hunter. Even if killed, it doesn't matter. I will always wake up from the nightmare again. The so-called hunters were organized by Simmons in the early stages of nightmare reincarnation to investigate the truth of eternal night and fight against the constantly emerging evil and disaster people. Not only that, Simmons also constantly delved into every book in every library in the city, hoping to find a way to crack it. Unfortunately, in the repeated deaths of the hunters, they gained nothing from beginning to end, only an uncontrollable mutation and beastly transformation, ultimately falling into a frenzy of killing every living creature. And Simmons. He glimpsed a glimmer of knowledge in countless mysterious classics that he had never encountered before. Perhaps on this endless and long night of terror, only the precious time of the past is the least valuable. Due to his knowledge, he did not completely degenerate into a beast that would kill anyone. Because of his knowledge, he sheltered many survivors who remained rational throughout the long cycle of reincarnation. But time is undoubtedly cruel. When they first faced evil, they would rise up in rebellion and unite against the enemy. After the situation did not improve, they fell into chaos of mutual criticism, blaming others, and attempting to betray and seek a way out. Until the end, those who acted differently realized that their actions could never change anything, and then gave up hope in numbness. Those who give up hope and resistance naturally kneel on their knees and begin to pray towards the sky. The magic formation under Simmons's feet and the prayer in his mouth are the last attempts in this nightmare that has lasted for years. All the books in this city have been turned over, and countless strategies and plans have been considered. But when humans face the twisted monsters that appear in every nightmare, all they can do is really pray. The screams were getting closer and closer, and the crazy hunter laughed wildly, drinking blood profusely. But all those who pray don't even look up. After death, one will also wake up in a new nightmare. Simmons lifted his head in confusion and looked at the bright moon hanging high in the sky. He paused slightly to pray and murmured in a low voice, "God, why on earth do you torment your people? What we hope for is nothing but deep sleep and rest. For this, You can take away everything we have lost, our future, and everything we have only. Accompanied by a light sigh, the bright moonlight suddenly experienced a slight fluctuation. Simmons is not sure if he is feeling dizzy. Immediately, with the moon at its center, the entire sky began to tremble. The radiance of the stars behind the moonlight is twisted, and its brightness is uncertain. This distortion and trembling are becoming increasingly significant and difficult to ignore. An indescribable atmosphere envelopes the entire city. In the city, the wild beasts that used to run recklessly stopped, and the hunter who used to drink blood lifted his head. They saw the stars gradually disappearing from the sky. Until the whole night, only a sudden bright moon remained, as if illuminating an incandescent lamp immersed in pitch-black ink. Immediately after, the moon suddenly began to emit scattered starlight different from the stars, as if debris had fallen from it. At the same time, the radiance of the moon grew stronger and stronger, until it shone coldly like the sun, illuminating the entire earth. Simmons felt for the first time that even moonlight could be so dazzling. But after this unparalleled brightness, the moon has disappeared. In its original position, only a cluster of incredibly dense star debris remained. Has the moon disappeared? Simmons only had time to murmur the last sentence. Subsequently, the earth began to tremble and all things began to crumble. The sea roared and huge waves surged into the sky. The mountains shatter in trembling, and the earth cracks in shaking. The city almost turned into powder in an instant, and every body around us exploded into a mist of blood. Simmons's final consciousness, he couldn't even feel any pain. Because at this moment, my entire body and mind are occupied by one voice and one thought. NNNNN. The information contained in this brilliant voice is extremely complex and profound, and cannot be heard by ordinary people's ears. Such a sound, even if it requires all the cells in one's body to accept its trembling frequency, is far from enough. Even the entire world, the entire planet, may not be enough. So sacred, so high, so wonderful. For an instant, Simmons felt as if he was in a universe where only his soul existed, incredibly quiet. This tranquility almost moved him. Because there is only one sound in the entire universe now, and besides that, there is no noise at all, no arguments, no chaos, no interplay, no ups and downs. Therefore, there is no need to think, debate, speak out, or communicate. This is called great music has the faintest notes. In reality, Zhang Zicheng looked at the scene on the screen, almost crazy. Dog days system. Didn't you say it wouldn't have a significant impact on low dimensions? I just wanted to say, hello. It was even said outside the Milky Way, and I even spoke at the lowest volume. Now half of the planets in the Milky Way have shattered into fragments, and the moon has shattered into foam. The entire Earth's soil has been almost flipped over. You tell me it's okay. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. God of War. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4 God of War. Although the tone of the system is still not very undulating, the tone is lowered by several points. However, it does not have much impact on the universe. The determination of your influence on the universe only depends on whether the universe has been destroyed or not. Zhang Zicheng felt completely speechless, but at the same time, he also gained a new understanding of the fragility of the low-dimensional world. With a low volume of whispers, Zhang Zicheng felt a bit hard to hear, and surprisingly roared half of the Milky Way into scum. If he spoke normally, he might have blown up the universe again. Now Zhang Zicheng really doesn't know what to do. Just a little touch, the whole world will be on the brink of death. Even soap bubbles are stronger than low-dimensional ones, and there is no interaction at all. Just as Zhang Zicheng was distressed, he suddenly realized that countless starlight dots had gathered again beyond the devastated earth. At first, they just converged into a small ball of light, and as the volume increased, the light gradually returned to the cage, and the details became clearer. The moon has reappeared. This Zhang Zicheng was a bit stunned, only then did he realize that this was indeed a world full of peculiar powers, rather than the reality where all the physical laws he was in were incredibly strong. Then, like the cold air emanating from the ice, a silver mist slowly fainted from the moon and enveloped the earth. Under Zhang Zicheng's gaze, the shattered earth slowly swirled in this silver mist. The cracked earth merges with the high mountains again, and the ocean, which was once a catastrophic flood, pours back. The broken buildings are like Legos assembled on their own, and the blood mist condenses back into vivid flesh. The world influenced by one's own voice surprisingly returned to normal in a moment. At the same time, the volume of the moon has decreased by nearly half, even becoming no longer a regular sphere. The entire far side of the moon has become pockmarked and exposed countless pale and withered tendrils twisted together underground. The system explained in a timely manner, this planet is a living creature with high intelligence. It was not shattered by your voice before, but immediately transformed into a form of life and avoided it when it sensed the envelopment of your voice. Zhang Zicheng couldn't help but feel a hint of surprise and said to the system, and it also saved the planet with life. Is it the deity of this world's faith? Moon God. This is definitely a good god. The system did not answer this time, obviously not clear either. Just looking at the restored planet, Zhang Zicheng couldn't help but sigh. Unfortunately, it's really just a matter of watching. Any communication with low dimensions carries a cosmic-level risk of destroying the other person's world, which is too exaggerated. Although it was already late at night, Zhang Zicheng, who had just obtained the system, was completely free from any drowsiness. He furrowed his brow and pondered how to communicate with low-dimensional people. High-dimensional things cannot be moved by large systems, while small systems may not be as refined. The performance in low dimensions is even worse, with one mistake being the cosmic-level crisis of extinction, which is a major event in at least a dozen or so American superhero comics. In summary, this system is so powerful that it doesn't seem to be useful at all. Zhang Zicheng pinched his chin and racked his brains to find something useful from the system. However, it is estimated that the system was severely damaged during the upgrade process, and all other functions except for the upgrade and dimensionality reduction have been discontinued. Staring at the display screen for a long time, Zhang Zicheng suddenly had a flash of inspiration. Wait, the system can control the display. That is to say, it can at least control electronic things. System, can you control the data in my computer? Zhang Zicheng asked tentatively. The system said, in the definition of the computer is defined. Answer the host, the system can have limited control over the data in your computer. Zhang Zicheng immediately came to his senses and said, how limited is it? How much data can you manipulate? If the system is similar to the super AI in movies and TV shows, then Zhang Zicheng is also satisfied. A self-reliant AI can achieve countless things. However, the system is still that one, and if it doesn't cross over, it's not it anymore. This system adopts chaos algorithm, which is not directly compatible with high-dimensional programs. At the same time, the system cannot directly control microscopic things such as electrical signals. However, the system can modify display screen pixels with a resolution of 1080p or below to achieve the operation of displaying images that will. Zhang Zicheng has become numb. His eyes lost their radiance, staring at the screen for a long time and realizing that he could indeed see the pixels on the screen. Can you change the picture I see by combining them? Or is it a pixel-by-pixel clasp? Zhang Zicheng felt powerless and completely gave up all expectations for the system in his heart. Hey! After a long sigh, Zhang Zicheng said in a mournful tone that was more than heartbreaking, then you can first remove the screen you forcibly modified, and I will use the computer. On the screen, the planet that returned to the tranquil night disappeared and was replaced by Zhang Zicheng's custom desktop wallpaper. It is said to be wallpaper, but in reality, there is only one sentence, using black background and gray text, so that it won't be dazzling when cut back to the desktop at night. Make 1 million before the age of 30. Zhang Zicheng, who had just obtained the system, felt that there was still hope, but now, just like usual, he feels that his future is bleak. He skillfully opened Steam and clicked on a game called God of War Omega. This game was recently launched on the PC platform. The protagonist is a bald man with an axe and a daughter with a bow and arrow, who wants to sprinkle his wife's ashes on the highest mountain to fulfill her last wish. Although the title does not have a serial number, it is actually the 4th installment in the series. In the first 3 installments, this bald guy even wielded 2 knives, slaughtering a series of gods and achieving remarkable results. The reason why Zhang Zicheng suddenly clicked on the game was not to vent, nor was it because he became addicted to gaming in the middle of the night. He just remembered that the low dimension became like a ghost because he had been affected by playing Blood Source, a Cthulhu-themed game in the past. It looks like a ghost, but it should be much better than being destroyed by oneself. Zhang Zicheng shook his head and began to control the game characters to move forward and fight. Since it can be influenced by Blood Source, it can also be influenced by God of War. Although in the worldview of the God of War, mortals are also ants, at least there is still the presence of the protagonist Kratos, who can connect with the heavens and give mortals a glimmer of hope. I have nothing else to do. Your world is too fragile, and I can only pray for you. I hope that when I play this game, high-dimensional information will radiate and indirectly affect your world, so that there will also be a god slayer like Kratos in your place. Zhang Zicheng sighed and muttered to himself, hoping to generate more high-dimensional influence. At this moment, the system suddenly interjected and said, "Is it a high-dimensional electronic information puppet that can be controlled through dimensionality reduction?" Zhang Zicheng was taken aback and said, "What are you saying?" The system remained silent for a moment, seemingly defining what it was about to say, and then repeated, "Is it possible to downgrade the controllable electronic game character, Kratos? End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Methods of Low-Dimensional Communication. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 Methods of Low-Dimensional Communication. Zhang Zicheng said strangely, "Didn't you say that you can't manipulate more precise data and can only deduct pixels?" System. However, the electronic characters controlled by the host are both visible and controllable, and their information density is also very low, not much more complex than low-dimensional things. Upon hearing the naturally calm tone of the system, Zhang Zicheng suddenly gained an understanding. After all, this is a matter of another universe, and it is a successful existence that has been upgraded through one's own efforts. It cannot be forcibly manipulated by physical rules in reality. It possesses an unknown technology that is completely different from humans, although seemingly weak, in reality it has extremely high depth. To be honest, if it weren't for the system coming from low dimensions, Zhang Zicheng thought to himself that with his own wisdom, he might not even be able to understand the other party's surface. Since that's the case, he decided not to dwell on any principles anymore. Whatever the system can do is what it can do, just use it. However, after experiencing various situations before, Zhang Zicheng learned a lesson even if he was foolish. He immediately said, "Don't lower the dimension of the God of War that I control to a lower dimension with life. Isn't there still tens of millions of dimensions without any life? First, randomly lower Kratos to other worlds." The system immediately said, "Confirm command, dimensionality reduction in progress." A pile of garbled code flashed across the screen, and then it seemed like a game bug was stuck. The game character I controlled suddenly disappeared into the game scene. On the side, the daughter of the protagonist in the game still mechanically recites her lines without any reaction to her father's disappearance. This makes the originally lifelike NPC seem strange and stiff, clearly just a script that runs according to the program, without any intelligence on its own. System. Dimension reduction completed. Do you want to enable tracking observation? Open. Zhang Zicheng looked at the screen eagerly. All pixels on the display screen are instantly controlled by the system. Although they are captured one by one, the system can control all pixels simultaneously. As long as the accuracy can keep up, efficiency is not a problem. On a gray and barren planet, Kratos waited there with a cold ice axe on his back, standing in the same position as in the game. Similarly, there is no unnecessary response to changes in the surrounding environment. It seems that even after the dimensionality reduction of electronic characters, they are still electronic characters and will not generate their own wisdom out of thin air. Zhang Zicheng tried to control the joystick and had Kratos chop an axe towards the ground. Drink it. The familiar roar of a move spreads on a planet without any air. But the axe struck by Kratos silently cut a crack that stretched for hundreds of meters. It seems that Kratos' voice acting is not affected by a vacuum and can still be heard. But his interaction with low dimensions follows the rules of low dimensions themselves, and no sound comes out of the vacuum. Zhang Zicheng did not ask about the principle again, probably because low-dimensional characters were forced to adapt to the rules of high-dimensional game characters themselves. Anyway, these phenomena cannot be nested within his known human science, and he, who has already graduated, is too lazy to study and simply ignores them. In just a few seconds, the ground cut by Kratos began to tremble, and slowly, the cracks grew larger and larger, eventually forming a deep and bottomless canyon that was 4 or 5 zhang wide. This power. Strictly according to Kratos' own setting. Zhang Zicheng was pleasantly surprised. Surprisingly, one thing is that the low-dimensional world is a world with complete physical laws, and Kratos is not like in games where he can use his arms to directly twist off the heads of gods, but he can't even open a wooden door when playing. Entering the low-dimensional Kratos, every move he makes is the level he should have achieved. The second surprise is that he can finally unleash the power that will not destroy the planet in low dimensions. Watching the canyon split by Kratos, Zhang Zicheng was even moved. From whispering greetings to destroy half of the Milky Way, to just splitting the Earth, the precision improvement in the middle was self-evident. At the same time, he was also surprised that the virtual universe built on code, such as the Internet, electronic information and data modeling, could be recognized by the low-dimensional world. The system seemed to recognize the host's confusion and explained, if it's just ordinary code, it's meaningless in low dimensions. However, the information carried by high-dimensional virtual images is enough for these codes to express themselves. After all, the description of the character itself is also very accurate and clear. Zhang Zicheng nodded clearly. The meaning of the system is that the reason why low dimensionality can make Kratos truly exist instead of becoming a pile of useless data is ultimately due to the recognition of this image by high dimensionality itself. If you play a game blindly, you may be reduced to a low-dimensional world because it carries not much high-dimensional information and cannot maintain your defined image. So the game characters that can be dimensionally reduced may only be those who are popular in reality. That's enough, too. Zhang Zicheng had a clever idea and even drew analogies. He directly took out his phone and sent a voice message to his account, saying, "System, reduce the dimensionality of the voice data I sent to low dimensions." System. Confirm command, dimensionality reduction in progress. Dimensionality reduction successful. The next second, the voice bar rang around Kratos, with clear and precise pronunciation. More importantly, everything around him remained unchanged, and even the dust beneath Kratos' feet did not tremble at all. Zhang Zicheng suddenly exclaimed with joy, "Damn it! It's so simple. Half of the Milky Way has been destroyed in vain." He understands that the dimensionality reduction of the system is based on the language data reconstructed by the phone, not the air vibrations received by the phone, so his words exist cleanly in the low dimensions, just like the game character Kratos. Code is really a good thing, and Zhang Zicheng is extremely grateful for information technology. Otherwise, he would have had a golden finger and would not have been able to study it, let alone utilize it. After calming down his previously restless heart, he said in a relaxed tone, "All right, let's start interacting with the lower dimensions officially. The system will transfer Kratos to the planet that I almost destroyed before. Simmons reopened his one eye and saw darkness before him. He skillfully raised his hand, his sharp nails cutting open the skin around his eyes, exposing them. The purpose is to introduce familiar and luxurious bed decorations. He suddenly let out a disappointed sigh. The scene of his last death was extremely shocking, making him think that the entire world had been annihilated, and everything had returned to eternal tranquility. It seems like just another ordinary disaster. A faint sound came from beside him, and Simmons turned his head to see his wife smiling at him. Just now, her eyes are huge compound eyes like insects, and these compound eyes are like beehives, with unknown creatures surging through every pore. Her mouth, full of sharp teeth, opened left and right, revealing a sharp tongue and piercing toward Simmons. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Hello. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Hello. Simmons skillfully dodged and then pierced his wrist with his sharp nails, blood gushing out, forming a chain that bound his wife. My wife began to struggle violently, her back like insect wings breaking through her newly restored pajamas, and her arms like mantis shells struggling to separate the red chains on her body. But it's useless, Simmons can guarantee that he won't miss out. After all, he has already trapped his wife with chains hundreds of times in nightmares. At first, he would occasionally break free, but as the number of nightmares increased, Simmons would learn more knowledge each time, control and reduce his own alienation, and his strength had already far shaken off his uncontrollable wife. Don't worry, dear. Simmons's one-eyed eyes were filled with gentleness and love, his black-haired palm caressing his wife's pale hair like a wild beast. Feeling his wife gently caressing in his palm, Simmons knew she was acting coquettishly. My wife still loves me, which is not in conflict with her desire to eat me. Simmons whispered, darling, rest well. I'll bring you the food for this nightmare later. As he spoke, he got out of bed and stepped on the carpet with his withered feet. Go to your wardrobe, put on loose clothes, and put on a hood that covers your face. Simmons was fortunate that his lower body had not undergone severe mutations, otherwise he might not have been able to even wear pants, which was really unsightly. Finally, he picked up his metal cane leaning against the door and walked out of the bedroom. As soon as he left, Simmons lifted his cane and used its sharp bottom to pierce through the head of the butler who was originally on standby at the door. Nowadays, the butler's head is as ferocious as his wife's, belonging to the same mutation. But his lower body mutated more severely, like a mosquito's lower body filled with blood, bulging into a ball. Simmons calmly glanced at the butler who had fallen to the ground. His wife's mutation was being attacked by her in a nightmare when she wanted to go out. But as the long time passed, he couldn't even ignite the flames of hatred in his heart. Every time I wake up, I have to clean up the crazy people who are out of control at home, which is a bit annoying. Simmons' leather boots crossed over the still twitching body of the butler and skillfully walked into every room on every floor of his house, killing the chef, son, daughter, servant, gardener. Again to prevent them from attacking his wife after he left. Until there was only one living creature left in the entire mansion, his wife, he left those corpses with blood all over his body for her to eat. I went outside the courtyard and tightly closed the door with a chain formed by blood. The reason why he didn't kill his wife was because every time death came to a new nightmare, he would wake up at the same time as others. If you are killed right after waking up and then killed again the next time you wake up, you may die hundreds or thousands of times in a short period of time. That kind of stimulation was too painful, and Simmons didn't want his wife to bear it. He would rather let her live longer every day to soothe the fear of the last death. Moreover, he had already realized that he could only hope for God's forgiveness to end his nightmares. Otherwise, no matter how many nightmares he experienced, he would not be able to escape such a terrifying cycle. Simmons walked at a fork in the road and almost had to habitually head to the library. This is a habit that has been practiced thousands of times in the past. But now he has already memorized all the books in the entire city. Therefore, the direction he is currently taking is the square in the center of the city. I have to draw a seal that can communicate with the gods again. That's a hard job. Fortunately, every nightmare, as long as the disaster does not occur, even if hundreds of hours have passed, time will still remain in the dark, and he does not need to worry about wasting time. However, Simmons suddenly felt that the road he was walking today was a bit too smooth. In the past, just going to the square required killing 7 werewolves, more than 20 madmen, 6 dogs, and 4 huge vampire monsters, which were almost fixed. Occasionally encountering hunters, if they are normal hunters, they will greet each other. If they are abnormal hunters, they will have to fight, and sometimes they may even be killed. But today, I didn't encounter any monsters along the way. The street is quiet, with only a hazy mist and towering moonlight between the exquisite buildings. Suddenly, Simmons's bloodshot, one-eyed person looked at the moon in confusion. Is the moon a little smaller? After all, according to normal time, Simmons may have been staring at the same moon for over a decade, and he could still detect such drastic changes. In confusion, Simmons finally arrived at Central Square. I saw countless corpses and debris piled together, and the buildings around the square were also in a state of disrepair, even the ground was no longer as flat as before. It's obvious. There was a big war here before, and I was dealing with those out-of-control lunatics at home and didn't notice the commotion here. After all, in the nightmares of the past, when I first woke up, I was the most chaotic, and I could hear screams and screams in my ears all the time, nothing unusual. Just this time, the situation is different. Simmons had little fluctuation in his heart, it was just another terrifying disaster that wanted to take away his life. He walked slowly into the square and only then did he notice that there was not much blood on the ground. The vast majority of corpses have been frozen into ice and shattered into countless particles. The scene, which was originally littered with corpses, doesn't look so disgusting. Are there still sober people around? A voice rang out from a certain alley radiating outward from the square. Simmons raised his head and saw a bald man with a cold and stern expression, holding a sharp axe, walking out from the source of his voice. Strange, weren't there so many people here summoning me before? Where have you all gone? Simmons had to admit that at that moment, his heart suddenly twitched. What does the other party mean? We are summoning him here. Did I make a mistake in writing the seal? That's not right. In my own description, there is clearly a paragraph like, the existence above the world, the ruler of all living beings, the ruler of all living beings, the judgment day that plunged the entire world into the abyss, represents the eternal existence of power. The Milky Way is not as great as you might think, and the universe is just your dream. Please grant us a true and void death, demonstrating your kindness. Even if you can't find your target, you shouldn't fall on this man. Although the other person looks incredibly normal, there is no mutation in any part of their body, just like an ordinary person. This kind of ordinary, placed within this city, is incredibly eye-catching and can be considered the greatest strangeness. And Simmons could indeed feel the indescribable power and pressure from this strong man, as if facing a mountain. How can such pressure be compared to a monster that completely changes its life form at a glance? People who have experienced such nightmares may despair and go crazy, but when faced with conventional and understandable forces, they will no longer fear. Simmons couldn't suppress his curiosity and walked up to ask, "Who are you?" The strong man didn't turn his head, but immediately turned his whole body around, appearing somewhat stiff. The other person remained silent for a moment before speaking out again, I am the individual who changed your world. This is not what I wanted, I am very sorry. Just as the sound appeared, there was no change in the expression or mouth of the strong man. The sound seemed to have originated from nothing in the air and spread on its own. In countless nightmares, Simmons has also seen similar situations, most likely that this seemingly ordinary strong man is actually just a puppet controlled by the people behind the scenes. It's not an abstract puppet, but a puppet like a string puppet that truly requires control to move. Generally speaking, such guys have powerful puppets, but they themselves are very weak. But Simmons did not speak ill of himself. His numb heart showed no interest in mockery, and he simply said straightforwardly, "Really? Then please eliminate the change to our world." He didn't believe what the other person said, he was just too lazy to question. "You say so, as long as you can do what you say, it's okay." Whether it's true or false, Simmons doesn't care at all. Just like people who are about to starve, facing missionaries holding bread, they will not question the existence of God at all. As long as you can give yourself a bite, the other person can believe that they are God. The voice fell silent for a moment, and during the process, Simmons noticed the bald man in front of him holding a blue giant axe, staring intently ahead, seemingly breathing, but in reality, no air was being ingested into his body. It is indeed a puppet. He felt increasingly disappointed in himself, and the slightest expectation had almost disappeared. At this moment, the voice rang out again. "I hope so too. But I just wanted to communicate with you before and destroyed half of your starry sky. I don't know how to do it." Simmons was taken aback and looked up again. Sure enough. In the starry sky, there is only one solitary moon left, and all the stars behind it have disappeared. Simmons does not know the speed of light, nor how vast the universe is. According to common sense, the destruction of a star must wait for light to reach Earth before he can notice its disappearance. But Zhang Zicheng's previous greeting, the vibration that spread throughout the universe, even the photons transmitted in the real air became extremely chaotic, equivalent to refreshing the transmission of light throughout the universe, and creating the cosmic black field. Not only did he destroy half of the Milky Way, but even the remaining Milky Way Earth cannot be seen now. We need to wait for light to cross a long distance again before it can arrive. But precisely because he did not understand all of this, Simmons did not question it. He took a deep breath, his hand holding the pointed iron staff trembling slightly, and asked, "You said, when I tried to communicate before, did you mean the NNNN? I heard before." Zhang Zicheng had some doubts and once again sent a voice message to his nickname, asking the system to reduce the dimensionality of the voice bar and say, "I said, hello." Well, maybe you died before hearing the following syllables. "I'm sorry, but your universe is really fragile. Hello, you." It seems that the beginning does indeed sound like an end syllable. Just as he was pondering, Simmons suddenly had goosebumps all over his body and suddenly noticed something terrifying. What the other person says is clearly a language they have never heard before, but they can understand it themselves. All the syllables combined together are unfamiliar words, yet I completely understand their meanings. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Moonlight Landing. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors. Chapter 8. Portal. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Portal. Landing on the moon is both difficult and simple. Zhang Zicheng asked the system to hide the low-dimensional images first, then opened Steam again and selected a game called Portal. The protagonist of the portal has a teleportation gun, and as long as it hits two roughly flat surfaces, it will generate an interconnected portal. The teleportation gun bullets in the game have a range limit, but Zhang Zicheng has preliminary ideas. Since the system can select the landing point of the game character for dimensionality reduction, it can first lower the game protagonist to the moon and fire a shot, then elevate the game protagonist back to the game, and then re-reduce it to Earth. There should be no problem with this process, as long as the teleportation gun in the game can still run in low dimensions. Zhang Zicheng, who had learned many lessons, even found a lifeless lower dimension for experimentation in order to ensure absolute safety, just like when reducing the dimension of Kratos. However, Zhang Zicheng suddenly remembered something. Wait a minute, it seems that the moon doesn't have oxygen. Those people who went to the moon probably just suffocated. As he spoke, he raised his head and asked, "System, can we reduce the atmosphere in the game, God of War Omega. System. There is no air present in this game. Zhang Zicheng was speechless, but upon reflection, although Kratos himself had various descriptions in the system, there was absolutely no inexplicable setting such as the need for breathing. Games are the art of the lens, everything outside the lens is chaotic, and the plants in the game scene will definitely not produce carbon dioxide. It is estimated that only games that truly set the presence of air can perform dimensionality reduction operations on oxygen. Zhang Zicheng immediately remembered a relatively small game called Hypoxia, which had extremely detailed air settings. Although it was essentially code, what if the descriptions inside were low-dimensional and acceptable? He opened Steam again and found the game on the store page to make a purchase. During this process, Zhang Zicheng's relatively high-end computer, the fan, had already begun to roar, and running 3 games simultaneously made the CPU run at almost full capacity. While Zhang Zicheng was carrying out these operations, Simmons and others welcomed some rational survivors. These people's appearances can be described as bizarre, and naturally they are curious about this strong man with a cold and stern expression, holding a sharp axe emitting cold air. When the whole world is strange, normalcy becomes unique instead. Just hearing Simmons' explanation, they all looked at each other in disbelief and whispered to each other. "Are you saying he's a god?" One of the individuals, resembling a mixture of humans and snakes, asked hoarsely in a hoarse voice. Simmons shook his head wearily and said, "No, this man is a puppet of God walking on earth. And that voice should be God, right? Although I'm not sure if he can really solve all of this, at least he's willing to take us to the moon to see it first. What if we go to the moon?" In the crowd, a tall figure spoke in a muffled voice. "I still remember scholars saying that the moon in the sky is as broad as the earth under our feet. Can you communicate with the earth?" Simmons squinted his one eye slightly, as if he could fall asleep in the next second, but he still struggled and said, "I don't know, but our situation can't get any worse. Any choice is worth trying." This sentence actually silenced everyone present. Several of them looked at Kratos with a hint of anxious anticipation and hope. On the square, the body that had been previously chopped down by Kratos's axe quietly melted, coupled with the blood flowing out of Simmons' body, making the air filled with a strong smell of blood. Everyone present was just pondering, not taking the smell seriously. As the smell of blood drifted further and further away, at a corner of an alley, a wild dog with fur all over its body and exposed fangs sniffed and turned its head to look in the direction of the square. The wild dog let out a hungry growl from its throat and slowly walked towards the direction of the square. Just as it crossed the corner and exerted force on its limbs, trying to accelerate towards the direction of the bloody smell, a leather glove suddenly protruded from the shadow and grabbed the wild dog's throat, making it unable to help but whimper. Ow! Puff! The flesh and blood were torn apart by the rusty and dull bone-cutting knife, and blood splattered on the cloak of the hunter's uniform, making it difficult to distinguish the color of the blood and leather itself in the dark. The hunter with a bandage on his face opened his mouth and drank the black blood flowing from the remaining limbs of the beast. Then he threw away the corpse in his hand, spat out a white mist from his mouth, and also looked towards the direction of the square. Under the brim of the triangular hat, his silver-white pupils were exposed, but his original white eyes were filled with blood, almost black. Blood! I must have more blood. In order to become an heir. Whispering softly, the hunter lowered his head and dragged his heavy bone-picking knife, walking towards the direction of the square. At this point, Zhang Zicheng had completed the preparatory work and placed the protagonist of the Portal game next to Kratos. Simmons and others only felt a fleeting moment before their eyes when they saw a strange woman appearing next to the strong man. This woman was stiff all over, with no expression on her face. Her face was expressionless, not as cold and hard as Kratos, but as wooden as a carving, devoid of any charm. This is the protagonist of Portal, Schwer. Schwer and Kratos stood together, like the difference between a breathing wax figure and a puppet. Although neither had any life, it could be seen that they were entirely made by different craftsmen. Is this a new puppet? Since it is a puppet, what it looks like is reasonable, and Simmons and others are not entangled in this. He was just a little curious, could this female puppet lead himself and others to the moon? What is she going to do? Can she fly? Even if she can fly, how can she carry so many people here? At this moment, Zhang Zicheng's voice rang out. There is no air on the moon. You put on these oxygen masks first. As he spoke, a pile of breathing masks from the game Hypoxia scattered all over the ground. Zhang Zicheng opened a modifier to play the game, and although these masks were not connected to any devices, they were directly modified to infinite oxygen at the code level. To be honest, Zhang Zicheng really doesn't know if it's useful, so he can only rely on luck. Anyway, if these people die, they will also be resurrected by the moon. When others heard this and looked at each other, Simmons took a step forward, put on his mask, and then stood quietly in place, watching Schwer holding a teleportation gun, waiting for the other party to send him to the moon. Seeing Simmons's performance, the others picked up the mask in a casual manner. Only a few of them mutated too much, and the mask couldn't be worn on their face. Zhang Zicheng didn't notice it. Subsequently, Zhang Zicheng controlled Schwer and aimed at the ground, pressing the shooting button. A blue energy hit the ground, instantly creating an oval-shaped pit. Before Simmons and the others could react, there was a fierce howling wind. The atmosphere rushed frantically towards the vacuum of the moon, with a force approximately equal to the pressure of atmospheric pressure. Such a huge and terrifying force made Simmons and other people unable to maintain their bodies, and they were instantly sucked in along with other debris and garbage in the square. Simmons only felt a whirl, completely unable to control his body being carried away. At that moment, his first reaction in his mind was actually that he had been swallowed by another monster, right? What about landing on the moon? It's just a huge opening on the ground. How could it possibly go to the moon in the high sky? Or is this a bad joke like, the moon is heaven? In the midst of indescribable disappointment, Simmons felt his whole body floating lightly. A sense of relief came from him, as he felt the chaos of heaven and earth hanging upside down. With very little force, he regained his balance and stood on the ground. The vast expanse of gray and white land left Simmons somewhat stunned. Is this hell? He slowly looked up and saw a dark celestial body in the endless darkness that he had never seen before. Simmons's Adam's apple twitched and his one eye trembled slightly, feeling incredulous. As a well-educated aristocrat and mayor of a port city, Simmons undoubtedly has seen the world's charts. The familiar contours of the land, the familiar coastline. The frost of the North and South Poles, the atmosphere. He had already guessed what that celestial body meant. Is that the land we live on? That is to say, are you now, on the moon that has been looked up countless times in the past? Is it that simple? After falling into that cave, I came to the moon in such an instant. Absurdity. It's ridiculous. Thinking in his heart, Simmons's one-eyed gaze slowly oozed a drop of blood. Blood droplets slowly floated in the oxygen mask and landed at the bottom of the mask under the weak gravity of the moon. At this moment, Simmons constantly warned himself not to have fantasies, as all of this could be unreal and just a prank by another evil god. Only in this way can he suppress himself, not kneel so shamelessly on the ground, pray and mourn towards that incredible deity. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Moon God. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Moon God. Simmons poked the tip of his cane into the ground and made the final mark of the French seal on the surface of the moon. Next, those lunar survivors wearing oxygen masks stood on the complete seal and began reciting prayers recorded in books that could communicate with the gods. In fact, even an ordinary person on the moon would find it difficult to survive with an infinite oxygen breathing mask. Fortunately, although these people still have rationality, in fact, each one has a considerable degree of alienation, otherwise they wouldn't even be able to protect themselves in nightmares. The harsh environment will only make them uncomfortable, and will not lead to immediate death. But they just gathered together and recited for half a day. Nothing happened. As far as the eye can see, there is an endless withered and grayish white, without any trace of wisdom or the breath of life. Simmons, while trying to communicate with the moon in his prayers, his originally excited mood slightly calmed down and gradually became heavy. Going to the moon is millions of times easier than I imagined, but communicating with the moon is a natural difficulty and confusion. Because there is no direction at all. What kind of existence is the moon, does it have wisdom, and even is it a true deity or some so-called artifact? I don't know anything about it. Not only that, the Dharma seal is just an incomplete whiteboard, providing only the prayers of these alienated mortals. Lack of materials. If we had the blood of this divine family, perhaps we could have succeeded. Just as Simmons and others were feeling at a loss, Zhang Zicheng's voice suddenly sounded, "Wait a minute, someone else has entered the portal." "Is that someone you know?" On the moon without air vibrations, only Zhang Zicheng's voice can be heard by everyone. Simmons turned his head and saw a somewhat familiar figure flying out of the portal that was continuously spewing high-pressure air from a distance. The hunter's hat in the high altitude was lifted off, revealing his face wrapped in bandages, and he still held the rolling-edge bone-picking knife in his hand, which could not distinguish rust and blood stains. It was the crazy hunter who killed everyone on the outskirts in the last nightmare. The portal has not been closed, so a small vent, even if open for a week, will not have any impact on the Earth's atmosphere. Zhang Zicheng thought that he might have to take these people back in the future to avoid the problem of high-speed negative pressure again, so he simply kept the portal open and gradually stabilized the air circulation. So as soon as the hunter approached the square, he was sucked into the portal by the negative pressure of the moon, and then thrown into the air by a hurricane. He had not yet had time to be pulled down by the gravity of the moon. But Simmons lifted his head and saw an extreme ecstasy in the bandaged features of the other person. The next moment, the hunter adjusted his body in mid-air and landed lightly on the head of a short and chubby prayer. He crouched down with his legs bent, and the bone-picking knife in his hand swung silently, instantly cutting off his head wearing an oxygen mask. The hood that covered the face, as well as a lump of mucus wearing an oxygen mask, suddenly floated into the air. Even in that lump of mucus, two lonely eyeballs can be seen anxiously looking in all directions. The short and chubby reciter's body quickly bounced out, reaching out his hands, which were also made of transparent mucus, trying to catch his head. Although the quality of the brain is not important, the eyeballs that can see things inside are very important. A blood-stained leather glove stretched out, grabbed the breathing mask in the air, and put it on the hunter's own face. Only then did he take a deep breath of pleasure and enjoyment again. It is obvious that at the moment he arrived at the moon, he understood the magical function of this mask. Subsequently, the hunter opened his eyes and completely ignored the other prayers. Facing the land of the moon, he opened his arms and said fervently, "Moon God. Moon God. Are you here to pick me up? Can I already be your heir? What a magnanimity, please appear. Let me conceive. I will definitely become your stepson, giving birth to myself from the echoes of blood." His roar was incredibly passionate and earnest, but only Zhang Zicheng could hear what he said through system translation. In the eyes of others, the hunter's shout blended seamlessly with the pitch-black night sky, without a sound. "Drink it." Kratos's voice needs no medium to ring in everyone's ears. A flying axe suddenly shattered one of the hunter's arms. A large ball of blood-colored ice debris exploded on the moon, splattering in all directions like a slow-motion camera. "Damn it, won't you just chop him down?" Zhang Zicheng felt a bit hesitant. "Don't die, I want to quickly find a knowledgeable person to ask about the worldview of this universe." When he heard the hunter's words, he had already manipulated Kratos to throw the flying axe, but due to the distance being too close, it was too late to cancel the attack. Zhang Zicheng nervously looked at the screen and realized that the hunter was just moaning in pain inside the oxygen mask. He took 2 steps back and then used the edge of his bone-picking knife to press down on his wound. Fortunately, Kratos's axe was filled with icy energy, almost stopping the bleeding as soon as he broke his arm. The hunter, seeing that he had not shed too much blood, looked indifferent. He only looked left and right, and the eyes exposed under the bandage looked a bit confused. Moon God. Where are you? Why haven't you appeared yet? I am ready, I can take on the big responsibility now. As he spoke, the bandage hunter looked at Kratos, his black background and white eyes emitting a non-human aura. A white mist rose from the oxygen mask and said, I understand. It's still a test for me, right? Another slaughter, another fight. I will do it, I will drink his blood profusely, absorb the echoes of his blood, and attain sublimation. Until it meets your flesh and blood. In the midst of fervent self-talk, the hunter rushed out without thinking, wielding a bone-picking knife with one hand and chopping towards Kratos. Unfortunately, the gravity of the moon is too small to provide sufficient grip. But after all, the hunter had experienced countless battles and faced countless monsters. He immediately lowered his body's tilt angle and instead used weak gravity to charge towards Kratos like a shell. The bone-picking knife slashed from bottom to top at Kratos's unarmed chest. Blood splattered, and Kratos let out a muffled snort, with a burst of blood splattering from his body. EP1-10 Zhang Zicheng watched helplessly as the blood bar in the bottom left corner of the screen peeled off. But it's still okay. Perhaps Kratos's defense is also in sync with the description in its settings, rather than being beaten to death by small monsters for gameplay like in the game. However, as a game character, although only a drop of blood was lost, after all, the defense was broken, and Kratos appeared to have suffered as serious as real damage. This feedback made the hunter even more excited and began to fiercely add attacks. Zhang Zicheng rolled his eyes. With such a weak attack, he couldn't kill Kratos even with a single blow, so he simply put down the controller and didn't want to fight back. Instead, he tried to figure out how to capture the enemy alive and ask for intelligence. However, no one noticed that the blood scattered by the hunter before was like blood-colored ice crystals and snowflakes, slowly falling on the seal drawn by Simmons and others. And as he fought against Kratos, Kratos's blood also splattered on the ground. The blood of the god of war melted the hunter's frozen blood and soaked it together on the rocky ground of the moon. At the next moment, the seal drawn by Simmons began to emit a hazy white light. The white star debris that made Zhang Zicheng feel somewhat familiar began to float slowly from the ground. Simmons' attention was also drawn back from the battle between the two, staring in amazement at the strange phenomenon happening on the ground. Is that the blood of the clan with divine aura? The earth began to tremble silently. Those rational people standing on the moon are almost unable to stabilize their bodies. Only Kratos is like a wax figure with legs embedded in the ground, occasionally making a painful sound as the hunter attacks. But Zhang Zicheng could see clearly that even the blood skin that had originally fallen automatically returned to full. Suddenly, countless withered and white tentacles extended from the cracks of the earth, like the world tree connecting the sky and the earth. Then these tentacles softened and twisted together. Eventually, a huge monster formed with a slender body and countless long tails at the end, and its head faintly visible in a hazy and dreamy white star debris. He stands between heaven and earth, sacred and beautiful, with his head hanging down, and everyone can feel his majestic gaze. Every rational person who comes to the moon lowers their head deeply, trembling all over, afraid to look at such an existence. Afraid of becoming the eternal and fervent pursuer of the other party at a glance. Finally appeared this evil god in the worldview of the universe. Zhang Zicheng's eyes lit up. It's like seeing the terrifying upright ape of its prey. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Nomenclature. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Nomenclature, Moon God. Moon God. At the moment of seeing this monster, the hunter immediately stopped his movements and no longer continued to attack Kratos. He was first immersed in the shock for a moment, then showed an ecstatic expression, and instead ran towards this huge creature. The hunter's heart was extremely excited, eager, joyful, passionate, and ecstatic at this moment. He waved his bone-picking knife and rushed out like a flying shuttle, flying almost close to the ground and quickly spanning dozens of meters, cutting at the forelimbs of the moon god supported on the earth. And this knife actually sliced open the skin of the huge creature, causing blue blood to splash into the air. Ha ha ha. The hunter directly took off the oxygen mask on his face, enjoying the blood of the moon god soaking in his face, and greedily stretched out his tongue to catch the bloodstains in mid-air. But the magnificent giant creature paid no attention to the hunter's movements. His head was in the midst of silver mist and debris, and his gaze shifted to Kratos, seeming curious about what it was. At the same time, a vague and incomprehensible tremor spread out without any medium in the vacuum. Ah, c.gedftain, Ilya Kadishtu. Even if there was no air, all the rational people who knelt on the ground listened in their ears, and suddenly countless people screamed and howled, covering their ears. They were extremely frightened and had no communication with this magnificent creature. Even Simmons felt as if his brain was being pulled into a swamp by countless tentacles, and his consciousness was instantly stirred up, making it difficult to think. Fortunately, another voice sounded at the same time. Who are you asking me? I'm not very good at describing it, probably a high-dimensional life. What about you? Why do you always backtrack the time of Earth? The words full of order and reason immediately cleared Simmons' brain and made him shiver with excitement, as if rinsing his mouth with mint ice water after swallowing a large mouthful of mustard. Even in the extremely cold environment of the moon, he could feel a cold sweat emanating from his entire body. If it weren't for the god who used puppets speaking up, he would probably have become an ignorant beast. Simmons, who had already lost too much blood, almost fainted under such stimulation. But he still struggled to support himself. Because he also wanted to know all the answers. And the account of this unnamed deity raised a sense of ecstasy within Simmons, which belonged to himself as a mortal. That is a strong pleasure similar to acquiring new knowledge, exploring the truth, and summarizing theorems. High-dimensional life. What does high-dimensional mean, heaven? Is it the dwelling place of God? So, is he an angel? Or perhaps God himself? No, no, no. This is too blasphemous. How dare I speculate recklessly? Simmons lowered his head deeply and dared not participate in the communication between the two gods. His heart can only pray, may God love the world and end all that he has suffered. I am just trying to prevent being imprisoned in the ancient world of this planet and cannot leave. Waiting for the day when the stars return. Zhang Zicheng listened to the system's translation in his ear and was also stunned. He couldn't help but blurt out, is that all? The earth is used as a prison, while the moon is a prison guard. This is too easy to understand, isn't it? Completely unrelated to indescribable things. Yes, no one said that the world is a totally incomprehensible Cthulhu system. Perhaps it's just a group of nominal, polluting cosmic life forms. Zhang Zicheng asked, so, those mutants and monsters were all influenced by that prisoner and appeared. The system once again translated the answer from Moon God. Yes, a great existence. Thank you for awakening me and allowing me to continue fulfilling my duties. On the screen, the tall and wholly strange creature raised its head and looked at the location of the camera. This surprised Zhang Zicheng a bit and he asked the system, can he actually see the camera you set up? System. The system is not equipped with actual cameras, and all images are projected onto high-dimensional images after secondary processing. What the other party perceives should be the line of sight of the high-dimensional observer. In the eyes of some sensitive low-dimensional organisms, this line of sight is even stronger than the presence of gamma-ray bursts. That's it. Zhang Zicheng nodded. He didn't know, but in fact, this was the reason why the moon god was honest and didn't dare to make mistakes at all. As a creature born from the universe itself, such a respectful attitude has never been seen before in the face of the blind and foolish Lord Cygnus. After all, the evil gods do not care about this. After understanding Zhang Zicheng's language, the moon god immediately felt and learned much more information than ordinary people like Simmons. Such a massive influx of high-dimensional information has instantly added a significant proportion of reason and emotion to the already emotionless moon god's consciousness. This is not only influenced by high-dimensional factors, but also an almost survival instinct evolution. He looked up at the sky with the most honest attitude, even a slightly pleasing tone, and hummed in the vacuum, saying, "Not long ago. I heard your voice. Although I tried my best to avoid it, I still suffered a heavy blow and couldn't help but fall into a deep sleep." Zhang Zicheng suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. "Isn't that just the hello he said before?" He immediately changed the topic and said, "I want to save those mortals, so if the prisoners imprisoned on Earth are released, can the Earth be safe and sound?" Those Simmons and others kneeling in the seal of the Dharma all shook their bodies upon hearing this. Simmons couldn't contain his ecstasy and his whole body trembled slightly. He wanted to cry deeply, but unfortunately his blood and tears had already dried up in the endless cycle of nightmares. Although they couldn't understand the moon god's words, Zhang Zicheng's voice was soft, firm, and clear in their minds, becoming the absolute anchor of their rationality. A deity who has a 100% affinity for humans. Isn't this really a dream? Is there really such a good thing in the world? Faced with such a beautiful situation, Simmons felt an unreal feeling in his heart. Not only him, but also the hunter who was still scraping at the feet of the moon god, the bone-picking knife in his hand came to a standstill. His madness finally subsided after hearing the communication between the two gods. Hunters who have consumed the blood of the moon god are now able to survive on the moon without the need for air. He just lifted his head, looked at the moon god who had not given him any attention, and then looked at the empty sky. Infinite confusion replaced madness and encroached upon the hunter's rationality. He murmured silently, "Gods. Do any gods want to save mortals? So. What was all I did before for? My sacrifice, my lover. All the efforts I have made to become the stepson of the moon god and to restore the brightness of the entire world are in vain." The hunter slowly knelt down on the ground, his eyes filled with endless confusion. In the end, he bent down in pain and curled up together. Ignoring the ant stop at its feet, the moon god responded helplessly to the mysterious high-dimensional existence. "It's almost impossible to strip away the ancient prisoners and protect this planet." The prisoner's original body was the size of 3 galaxies, and even among the stars, it was a giant. And what is currently imprisoned on Earth is the last trace of his indelible essence that remains after he challenges the blind and foolish Lord Cygnus and is defeated. Once he is released, he will instantly restore his original appearance. Even if this planet is protected in advance, the prisoner's immense influence will still turn all life into chaos. The mutation caused by the influence of evil gods is an evolution that I cannot restore. Zhang Zicheng let out a sigh. If you have traveled to this world, you may need to investigate the truth at this level, and you may need to level up by defeating monsters first, perhaps tens of thousands of words to get some clues. And now, in just over an hour, at least the worldview limited to Earth has been understood. After understanding it, he came to the field that Zhang Zicheng didn't want to face. That is to solve specific problems. He couldn't help but complain, "Unfortunately, your universe is too fragile for me to control my own strength and help you without destroying you." Upon hearing this, the moon god's silver mist on his head gathered and dispersed nervously, and he didn't understand anything. Suddenly, he spoke up, "High-dimensional beings exist. If you want to help these mortals, I may have a way." End of this chapter.